talk about my Browns in a very interesting
Oh,
backfield where I think both running backs are going to have their games in, are going to be startable options. We all know the story. Nick Chubb was a Derrick Henry game against the Texans away from winning the rushing title last year. Kareem Hunt came back in week 8. And unlike the Denver Broncos, I do think this is one of the few backfields where both guys are startable. Hunt will get air usage, decent rushing volume, probably some touchdowns, and Chubb will be an elite rusher on the ground and see a lot of usage in the red zone. But it can't be ignored how Chubb's scoring volume and his air usage, quite frankly, declined when Hunt came in. He went from the RB6 to the RB15 in games with and without Hunt. He was still getting 18 carries a game, so plenty of volume on the ground, plus the goal line work, but the roster moves and narratives have all been about how Kevin Stefanski wants to run his old Viking offense now that he's here as the head coach in Cleveland. They brought in right tackle Jack Conklin, who was a pivotal part of the Tennessee Titans' insane run game last season. They bulked up at tight end, shelling out for Austin Hooper in the offseason. And the Vikings' volume does get carried over to Cleveland. I think Chubb and Hunt will both be awesome. Between the starting running backs in Minnesota last year, there were 400 carries and 100 targets. If both Chubb and Hunt, let's say it's a 50-50 split, they both get 200 carries and 50 targets, I think they can both be low-end RB2s. But more realistically, I see this breaking down to Chubb getting somewhere around 250 carries, while Hunt gets 150 carries on the ground and close to 50 or 60 targets. Now, should we expect to just copy and paste everything over from Minnesota over to Cleveland? No, but I just want to illustrate what these Stefanski narratives really mean for these two players. And I do think both guys can get close to that type of volume, which makes Hunt a weekly flex or RB2 option in deeper leagues like 14-team leagues. And he has value for me as a super high-end handcuff if anything were to happen to Nick Chubb. And then same thing, if something were to happen to Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb would skyrocket into that RB1 range. Alex, are you taking Nick Chubb in that
no.
13 to 15 range? Do you have him as more of like a RB20 type guy? Where do you have him?
I do have him as an RB2. So right now he's going as RB11 is what I'm seeing on Fantasy Pros. I have him as my RB16. So even as my RB16, like I just can't get myself in on Nick Chubb. I just don't see the upside being there. We saw a bit of the upside last season, like you said, weeks 1 through 9. He was the RB6, and that was getting some receiving work, getting a lot of the touchdowns. To end the season, though, RB15 from weeks 10 to 17, like that's much more in line with what I expect from him this season. Yes, he was still getting 18 carries a game, but when Hunt came in, he went from 3 receptions a game to 1 reception a game. That takes a huge baseline off of safety in PPR leagues. Yep. And also, in games they played together, Kareem Hunt had 3 touchdowns, Nick Chubb had 2 touchdowns. So I think there's definitely going to be some variance. One, Kareem Hunt's going to get the receiving touchdowns in this offense too. He's probably going to get in a couple times on the ground as well. So I do expect plenty of run volume from Cleveland. I do expect a better offense. Both guys are going to be startable most weeks. Chubb, if he's my RB2, I'm fine with it, but he's probably not going to be my RB2 with where he's being drafted right now. And I love drafting Kareem Hunt as well. I think Kareem Hunt could be essentially the slot receiver on this Browns offense because last year, I mean, I know it's a different coaching staff and things, but last year when Hunt played, he averaged 5.5 targets per game. So I know you talked about your splits between the two guys. I have Hunt closer to 100 carries, but I have him at 78 targets.
Wow.
So I think he's going to be utilized a lot in this passing game behind Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, and Austin Hooper. And I do think Chubb is going to get the bulk of the carries, but his receiving volume is going to be low. So I think both guys do have fantasy value. I find myself drafting Hunt a lot more than Chubb. This is another one of those situations where I'm taking the value on the second guy. And like you said, the upside for Chubb, I think the upside for Hunt is actually higher than the upside for Chubb.
But the
Because
passing
with
work.
Nick Chubb, even if Hunt goes, if Kareem Hunt misses time or he goes down, we're pretty much getting the Nick Chubb of last season, where if Nick Chubb goes down, Hunt is going to get all that groundwork. He's a threat in the receiving game. We saw what he could do in the receiving game when he was in Kansas City. So I think Hunt, if both of these guys were in the backfield on their own, Hunt would actually be the better player for fantasy. But I still love Nick Chubb's talent. I think he's going to have a fine season. But the draft ADP right now is just a little bit too rich for me.
Absolutely. The RB11 is way too high for me. This is per Fantasy Pros ADP right now. Looking across ESPN, My Fantasy Leagues, FFC Leagues, and a few others. So, yeah, I mean, RB11's too high. I have Chubb more in that like you said, the RB15 range. And if you're taking him to be your RB1, I would not feel good about that. I think he's a super safe, relatively high upside option. The thing is like, is Chubb going to be the new Jordan Howard, where he's just being relatively efficient, getting a bunch of usage? Now, I do think he's going to be better than Jordan Howard because I believe in the talent more. But with that said, it's like that is a capped ceiling that you have to consider here with Nick Chubb. I don't see, like you said, with the scenario where, okay, now suddenly Nick Chubb is getting all the passing volume. If something were happen to Hunt, I think that just means more for Jarvis Landry and Austin Hooper. There's so many mouths to feed there through the air in Cleveland. So it's a tough one. I think Chubb is definitely getting overvalued here, but I still think he has a role to play in the Cleveland offense.
Steph, real quick, let's just see how far Nick Chubb would fall down your board. So he's going at the RB11. Let's do an either or here with some of the guys going behind him in full PPR. Would you take Nick Chubb or Austin Eckler?
I knew you were going to give me this one. It's a tough one, but I will say Eckler here. This was just if it's PPR.
This was just RB11 versus RB12 in ADP. So I'm not trying to do anything funny here. This is no funny business. I'm just literally going to go down the list. So Eckler over Chubb, huh?
Yeah. So and this is all PPR, guys. Most of what Alex and I play is PPR, and so that's kind of the mindset that we go into. I know that's pretty much all ESPN leagues are PPR at this point. In any sort of PPR, I do have Austin Eckler as the RB13. I do think he would potentially struggle in a new offense, new quarterback, all of that. But I have Chubb as the RB15, so Eckler's 2 spots ahead of him.
All right, how about Nick Chubb or Aaron Jones?
That's a tough one. I do think there's a world where Chubb blows up on the ground and has a ton of touchdowns. You look at like Dalvin Cook over the last couple seasons, all this red zone volume. But just knowing that Aaron Jones has seen more of that red zone volume, I'll say Jones for right now. Jones in my rankings is actually the RB8. He gets more passing volume than most people think.
All right, we'll keep going down this list until we find out where you would take Chubb. So next, Nick Chubb or Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
Oh, man, don't do this to me. We're going to talk about CEH. But, man, at that point, it depends on who my RB1 is. If it's my first running back that I'm taking, I'll probably go Chubb there just for a little bit of extra safety. But if it's my RB2, I'll probably go CEH.
Awesome. Last one. We'll do one more. Nick Chubb or Todd Gurley?
These guys are back-to-back in my rankings. I'd probably go with Nick Chubb just because of the injury risk that's there with Todd Gurley. Even though I have Gurley projected slightly higher than Chubb, he's going to get pass volume.
Todd Gurley, who missed one game last year.
He missed one game last year, but there's so many concerns with this. We keep hearing about it so often. The knee. I'm not trying to be on that train. I might as well just take Nick Chubb there and get that safe, consistent volume. And if he blows up with 2 touchdowns that week, I'll be really happy. Whereas Gurley, there's a wider range of outcomes for me.